So, problem that I'm having with this door is it's supposed to be able to even close on its own. Like if someone was to walk out of it, it was supposed to completely close and ensure that at least that this catches, so that way someone can't just immediately open it right after they leave. So that's the problem that I'm having, and the reason why I'm having this problem is because this part of the door actually is protruding in a little bit. So there's no real way to push this back. This happens over time. Some houses settle, some walls shift, and that's pretty much where I'm at this point. If I open it all the way, I usually don't have this problem because the spring hinge closes with a lot more force, so it works easier that way. But let's say someone doesn't open the door all the way. Let's say someone comes in, the door is not closing behind them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to sand down the wood. I have a Black & Decker hand sander, sanding pad already attached to it. Just bought it, so take the twisty off of it. All right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sand this part above and below right here, because this is where it actually is catching me. And I know that because when I look at it, when it closes, this is the part that actually hits. Let's plug it in. Show that it works. And I'm just going to sand lightly. I'm not going to do anything major, but I'm just going to sand lightly this area where it's catching and this area. And if it closes firmly, or if it closes better afterwards, then we're in a better position. So we took this down a little bit, let's go right above it. One thing I like about this hand sander is it has a collection bag in it, so you don't necessarily have to wear a protective mask. Although I would suggest it if you're doing like a lot of sanding, because some of it will still kick up and won't go into that bag. But let's see, after just maybe what is it, 2 minutes? Let's see if this closes by itself. Now I'm going to do it right here. Still catching a little bit. How about like maybe there? Still catching, so. Same area, we'll try to take a little bit more off. Just take more off. But this is going to be one of those trial and error things. You don't want to take it down too much. So what you do is you take it down a little bit, you try to see, take it down a little bit. Just take it down a little bit more. Okay. Let's try it again. Trial and error, right? Still collecting. Well, it's still hitting. Let's do a little bit from here. Okay. It's a little bit of progress because normally it would have had to have been all the way open. But I think from here now, it's closing. So we are in the right area. It's just that you want to make sure that you don't take too much off. So you take your time and you do it trial and error. Try this from here, see if it closes. Nope. See, this part is still up a little bit, and this part, this, a little bit here, and maybe I can go further. We're not going to do it from here because we know what it pulls from here. We know what to shut away from here. So let's try it from like right here. This is kind of like standard one person width. If it closes from here on its own, then it's good. You don't necessarily have to make it close on its own from here. So let's do it from right here. Thanks, Ross. Ah! It moved in a little bit more, but it still didn't shut all the way. How about from here? Yeah, almost all the way. So we're definitely in the right area. The key thing is just to keep checking to see if I'm missing something. Maybe I should come a little bit further down here, but I know this area is pretty good. Yeah, I can literally see it's not touching this area. So now that it's closing in a little bit more, it's really easy to see maybe from right here and right here. So we still have 2 points. And it's important to understand that everything is constantly moving. Even if you don't see it moving, everything is constantly moving. Houses especially are always moving. So as they shift, as they move, the pieces individually will move. This is coming in, this is going down. So just because the door closed on its own 5 years ago doesn't mean it's going to close on its own 5 years later, 10, 15 years later. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go a little bit further down this area, because it's protruding enough to keep that door open. Alright, so it's time to actually change this sand pad. And how you know that? Because sand pads are supposed to be kind of rough in order to strip that surface up, strip the surface down. The paint is still surviving some of the sanding, so we know that it's time to actually change the sand pad. Alright, so more and more dust is starting to get into the air, even though I have this dust collector. It means that it's just time to change this. So I'll change this, or I'll dump this dust out. Be very careful about breathing in dust, especially from sanding down painted surfaces, because certain paints can actually contain lead, and once that gets into the air, it's very toxic. Let's test this out. We're making slow progress, and you know what? It's better to be safer than sorry, especially when we don't, like I said, create too much of a gap between the door and the frame that allows draft, because draft then makes it harder to temperature control the environment. So let's try it from here. That's almost closed. That's like very, very close. So we know we're making very slow gains. It almost closes completely on it. That one closed, that time it closed completely. So let's try this. Walking home, don't really open it too far, and it closed on its own. So what I'm going to do now is, I'm going to just take a little bit more off, just so that way it closes more comfortably on its own, because still, like, it should be able to close all the way, and you see it's still getting caught sometimes. So just a little bit more off and we're done. Alright, so I sanded down a little bit more, and so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how I finally was able to get it to the right point where enough of the actual frame is taken off to allow it to close on its own gently. So let's, tenant walks in, person walks in, normal width, boom. And so we have it closing to the point where it's not so much taken off the frame that you can clearly see and clearly feel the draft. We took our time, we took a little bit off of the frame to the point where we allowed it to close on its own without having to be open excessively before then. So just to reiterate, this is actual door closure. So I thought I had spring frames on, spring hinges, but I actually have a door closure. So even if this door closure on, the door has to be able to have enough clearance from the frame itself, which goes around it. So because I knew that it was rubbing against the frame and preventing it from closing, all I had to do was just take a little bit and a little bit and a little bit more off that frame until it closes on its own. If you guys ever have this issue, understand that everything is going to move over time. Houses, walls, floors, every part of that house is moving. You don't really notice it until things don't work the way they usually are supposed to. If you ever have this issue where you can't get your door closed without forcing it, or it just barely closes on its own, then you really would have to look at, is it rubbing against the frame? Is it rubbing against the door jamb? Are the hinges on correctly? Is the closer operational? Once you narrow down the culprit, in this case the door frame, you can use a hand sander, sand it down, and eventually, success.